Again, I guess this is a corn silage meeting. We're going to look at some data that we collected over the last year as it relates to densities, and we've got about 63 assessments that we've done, either BMR, some are BMR, a little bit more than half are conventional. We've had a whole variety of KTS in these bunkers, anywhere from a low of 24 to a high of 81. So that's quite the range. And over the next few years, I think we're going to see that range narrow rather quickly. Tower silos, just briefly. How many still put silage in tower silos here? Oh yeah, there we go. And we depend on gravity for density to pack those tower silos. We usually try to think of a strategy of we'll put our drier stuff in first and our wetter stuff on top, because that'll kind of swash it down, right? They work a bit, but I think as we talk about particle size, theoretical cut, in these silos, both these silos were filled at the same time. They had a KPS of just over 60. Even KPS will influence density of these silos. These particular silos, they were loaded at the same time. Of course, at the top, nothing was done. They filled them, leveled them off at the top, so they fed them out. You know what happens? You know what that looks like up there. And there's not a better job on a cold winter day to go up there and fork that off. You agree? No. In fact, we even have some, with some silo stuff or plastic, we even have ways to mitigate that loss of that forage at the top of the silos. With oxygen scavengers under a plastic, for example. Won't get into that, but you can see we lose some density up here in the top 10 feet. Both these silos, this is 2490, 2065. We get down here, and the average density from here to here on this 24-foot silo was 18.5. Remember that. I've got it in a red bar when we see some of the data on density. So that's pretty good. This one we were over here around 16. For all practical purposes, that is still pretty good. But we dropped to around 10 up here towards the top. So tower silos in the right situation still are good means or good way to store forage and have good quality, but I will have some compromised quality up here toward the top of the silo. Silage bunkers and piles, density. Why is it so important? Well, we still have some holes to plug that we haven't talked about yet. So when we go to these bunkers or piles of silage, we've taken density using the Dairy 1 probe into the face. We're not going up here, so most of these samplings for density are less than 6 feet up, unless we have some silage here that we climb up on. But it's the lower half of both bunkers. And it doesn't take you very long to figure out what happens with some low density piles as far as managing face, what happens with high density piles as far as managing face. There's a difference. Oxygen is limited. Look at the exposure to oxygen. As soon as oxygen is exposed to fermented forage, the deterioration starts. And you can see on this type of face, there's a lot more oxygen exposure than on this type of face. Very minimal here, but a lot of exposure here. We're about a 14 density over here on this side of the pile. We're almost 21 pounds of dry matter per cubic foot. So in all this data that we look at in the next couple of minutes is dry matter pounds per cubic foot. So here's the data. All of this silage was treated the density, but we have a high here of almost 22. Now Corey, who was just up here, helped me. No, he didn't even help me. Corey did the boring. And Corey's a pretty good sized guy, got a lot of muscle. He knew he did something different right over here.
I got that one for the side of the bunker.
Yeah.
But you
This,
didn't
it was tough even to get the sample. And then we get just over 21 the whole way down here to 15.9. But bunker silos up here, these 16s, 17s, even 18s are considered to be very well packed and good densities. This is under extension, what the recommendations would be with what we would look at some of the data out of Delaware with Dr. Tung out there, and what we see out of Minor Institute up in New York, what we see out of Wisconsin, and Mike Allen in Michigan. This is some pretty high densities. And then we get up here. This is virtually off the chart. You will notice that some of these bars have a red lining to them. Those bars are bunkers or piles that had shredlage put in. So there's a bit of a discussion out there as to shredlage, and can we pack it? Well, we can get a pack if we focus on it. We've got packing going on, pretty good packing here, here, down here, so it's well within these ranges. We decided to take a look, or at least attempt to take a look at forage quality at these different densities. So we divided them into 3 groups. This is even above optimal, if you will. Certainly optimal in this range, and very good in this range. And wanted to look at the effect of density and bunker silos. Again, all these were treated. We'll have another chart with a group that was not treated with anything. And look at fermentation, look at retaining feed value. Now, primarily what we're going to look at here is the amount of pH that feed dropped. You heard Stu talk about dropping pH in forage. And we're going to look at how much alcohol or ethanol was produced. How many grew corn silage or put up corn silage to produce some ethanol? Nobody. They're looking for that first person that put their hand up. Is that where you want to have a discussion? You didn't harvest that starch to be converted to alcohol or ethanol, because that's a very inefficient source of energy in the ruminant, and some of it is lost through evaporation to the environment, and it's the loss of starch or energy in your feed. The other issue is ammoniation. Now, some ammonia is good. We get some ammonia in that rumen, and it will stimulate the bacteria to be more active. But we want it controlled. We don't want too much, because you can go up to a bunker, and if they have ammonia over, this is percent of the protein, you take a little rake and you rake a little bit off, you can smell that alcohol coming off of that, or that ammonia coming off of that. You can smell the alcohol too, if it gets too hot. The alcohol will burn your nostrils if it's strong enough, and I've had that happen. If you rake this off and you get too much loss of nitrogen, which is ammoniation, loss of starch, there's an economic impact to feeding cows when that happens. If we're going to have that cow, if we're going to feed that cow that has the genetics to milk 200 pounds, we can't afford to lose starch. We can't afford to lose protein in the feed that we grew. It's one of those things that add up to a lot of things to get to that production level. So look at the trends here. High density, and that is high density. pH. And all these samples were taken in December, January, February last year, and you see the trend. You see the trend of lactic acid that was produced. VFAs, that's volatile fatty acids, that's the total acids of 4 that we look at in fermentation. And you can see this is a very nice level of VFAs. We decline as we go along here. Trends downward. This is a dry matter. We got a little bit higher dry matter here. This is a little bit wetter. Didn't seem to impact this by too much. And then we're back to a little bit drier again, more like the first set. But this loss is tolerable. This loss is getting near the threshold where we don't want to see it over 0.1 or over 1.00 and over 0.5. We believe that that's about the point where it gets to be excessive, and we have feed loss or nutrient loss in that feed. So, how many have heard the term silage energetics? You're going to hear about it. I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the next couple of years. Silage energetics is going to be the measurement of a sample of silage, looking at the pH, the amount of lactic acid produced, and the amount of ammoniation that occurs, and the amount of starch that's lost to alcohol or ethanol. I think it'll be a term that will be something like an RFV, relative feed value. If you're going out to buy hay and you've got, you know what your feed is at home and you're going to buy some hay, and we need to buy 180 relative feed value hay. You know pretty much what that is. Or if I'm going out there, I got all this really good stuff at home, I need to build that mat a little bit more, I need something more like 135 relative feed value. That gives you an idea of the quality of that feed. I think that's how this term silage energetics and the value that you see there will relate to how much you preserve in stable silage versus how much you may have lost. Okay? We have a set, not quite as big, of untreated silages because we wanted to see to some degree if there was a difference. So again, we broke it into 3 sets. And again, this top third, actually this up here that's off the screen, this density was a little bit higher than, slightly higher than the first set. And we go from this well over 20 to 17 to 14. And again, you can see this trend in pH. You can see this trend. Remember the other one was about 8.28 total acid. Coming down to this. And we have this ammoniation about the same as in the treated, but the ethanol is almost double what it was in the treated. And we have this trend. Now, the ammoniation we get down here. This set, I guarantee you, if you go up and you scratch a little bit off the face or dig a little bit out of the pile or the top of the silo and it has that amount of ammonia, you're going to smell it and it's going to burn your nostrils. So the difference between smelling ammonia and alcohol, the ammonia will burn your nostrils. The alcohol just has a strong alcohol smell, and many of us know what that smells like. Okay? So the difference between this kind of pH and this kind of volatile fatty acids in this top group compared to this pH and this 8.29, if you took a cubic foot of silage and compared the two, this one has almost 5 times the amount of acid to keep that silage stable than the group at 4.11. So think about it for a minute. We ferment this to get this acid created to stabilize our silage, stabilize the protein, the energy, the nutrients in that silage. And at least this piece of data shows that we accomplished that to a higher degree with the treatment versus another. Nonetheless, there is also the effect of this density, packing density, and how good a job we did when we filled the silage. So, how many are familiar with Rule of 800? 800. The Rule of 800. Nobody knows the Rule of 800? Good thing you came today because it's important. Maybe one of the most important things you take away from it. Rule of 800 is, let's do it easy. Let's say you're going to build this big pile over here in your dairy, and we have 2 tractors we're going to put on there, 40,000 pounds each. Pack that big pile. That's 80,000 pounds of weight. You divide that by 800, get an answer of 100, right? Am I thinking right? Got our math right? We're down to 100. You can bring 100 tons to that pile an hour to get that high density. If you bring more than that, you're going to be down the scale. Now, last fall, when we reviewed this information before corn silage time, the guys that were down below that 8.5, they immediately got on the phone. Okay, we got to get another tractor on here. We got to get more packing. We're going to do it. And I fully anticipate when we're back there working with those dairies this year, those densities are going to be considerably higher, more like in the other group. And it was amazing to me how close that 800 rule, even though that's not the only thing that contributes to this high density, that 800 rule was pretty right on. We got to some of these down here in the 16s, and they were, we figured out how much weight they had, and we had it figured out they could bring, say, 120 tons to the pot. And they were bringing 140 or 150. And with that middle group, we figured out where they were, and what they had for weight, and on those piles when they were filling, and invariably, if that was kind of the area, they were right on that 800 rule. It said if they calculated out to 100 tons, that's where they were, and they were getting those 18s and 19s. Those guys up in the 19s, 20s, they could have brought another 80 to 120 tons an hour. It would have had enough weight to pack those piles of bunkers. And they were ending up at this 20 and a couple of 21. There's a couple other things that contribute to managing packing for optimum density. Controlling the speed. You get me in that packing tractor, we'd be up there and down there. I don't like to go slow. Just ask the state troopers in Minnesota. It's always been a little bit of a problem for me, but slow down. How fast do you think you should manage that speed packing a bunker? Anybody have any idea how fast you should go on that? Those guys that were in that top third, 3.5 miles an hour, 4, it's not very fast. Some of them down to 3. So it's slow and easy, and you always go completely off the feed to shift gears and go back on. You don't come to the edge of the pile, shift gears, because you break traction to go back up again, and you'll lose density right there. So you want to design that pile like that one that was well packed at the very beginning. The picture was right beside the poor density versus the good density. You want to build that so you can do just that. Back that tractor or bring that tractor completely off the pile, start and get back on again. The next layer. So you got this blade and the truck dumps and I have seen it where some of these guys are so good, they get down to about 2 inches on that next layer to be packed on that pile. Some guys are really good. And I should have the video. We should put some video up there and see how fast they go up because it's slow moving. And then put that next layer on that wedge. The thinner, the better. And then to harvest that optimal dry matter, somewhere in that 34 to 36 dry matter. Some of you like it more 32, 33. Put it in that range and not get too far out of that where you have dry material where you're trying to sponge on. Any questions? Nobody's going to ask me if we should use duals or take the duals off? All right, okay.
What are you seeing with some of the rear attachments, the packing 3-point mounted? Have you done any checking on that?
Very good. I don't know what the model name is, it's something like Lavo or something, it's a yellow rig, and they actually have the wheels you can fill with sand. Seen a few of those. Improved density, no doubt. I am not a fan of sheep's foot because when that peg turns, you can watch it going up there. You got to be at the right speed to make it work because just a half an hour too fast, you'll see that it'll kick the little feet out. You want to pack everything down at the same time. And the sheep's foot doesn't do that. So I'm a little leery on the sheep's foot. But these smooth wheels that you can fill with sand and pack, that definitely helps. We can add, well, I know of one that we're right around 18,000 tons, or 18,000 pounds, 9 tons more weight on the back of those wheels. And you say, well, we're distributing that weight over too many. Maybe even distribution of weight does us more good than harm. And on the duals, if you got those duals on there and if you take the duals off and you're going up and down and you're making tracks, like on that very first slide that I have, if you see tracks, as you move that track up there and you see feed move away from the sides of those tires, do something different. Because you're not going to get the density. Put the duals on. If you have the duals on, you'll distribute that weight and you won't move that feed away from the edge of the tire. You'll pack it down again. And even packing down and moving is key. Any other questions? Yes?
What was the moisture on the bunker that had the density of the 20, almost 22?
66.
What was the question?
Oh, sorry. What was the moisture on the feed of that real high density of 66? Good question. How long should I pack the top of my bunker or my pile? How long should I pack my pile after we're done chopping? Since you're not asking me questions, I get to ask you something. Yeah. 1 hour. Who agrees with that? 1 hour. Hey, over here, is that pretty close? 1 hour?
At least.
At least 1 hour. Okay, now we're at least 1 hour, so it sounds like maybe 70 minutes, huh? Instead of 60. How many agree with that? Last week I was in Canada doing these kind of meetings, riding with Ed Thomas, who has done a lot of work on silage, silages, period, at Minor Institute in New York. And he has David, he's going to send me that slide. I keep calling him, and I haven't seen that slide yet. Here's this slide that any packing over 90 minutes is counterproductive. I know that even I have promoted, pack as long as you can after, you get that cover on. Now, counterproductive, you see on the top 24 to 30 inches, that when you pack more than 90 minutes, you lost density. And I think it has to do, we pack down once, get it packed, you keep sponging on that, you loosen it up. That make any sense? No? 90 minutes. Not one study, but several. Shows anything after, up to 90 minutes is good, like you're saying, yeah, good. Past 90 minutes, it's counterproductive. Yes?
What about tire with dual space?
That's a good question. And again, we have to watch what happens when you're moving across that pile. If you're packing that silage down and not making tracks where you're going along with that tire and you're pushing feet out, that's loosening feet, that's not packing. It's the same with, should I inflate my tires just for packing versus inflated tires for using in the field. Well, some people are saying we get a little bit better when we inflate a little bit, but not too much. Key is to watch what's going on. If the track moves up there and everything's going down, you're good. If you're moving up there and you're kicking some to the side, you're doing some harm as far as packing down and getting high density. All right? Good question. Very good. You only had to ask one question. I got 4 back. That's good. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these next couple slides. Here we do have Ripple did some work back in 1992. And he showed density here that when we had this low density, we had a lot of dry matter loss. And really, when we're talking about that production of ammonia, the production of ethanol, that is part of dry matter losses. 20%. When he got up here to 22, he had half the amount of dry matter loss. And that study he did back in 92. Summary? I think that's going to wrap it up. Question?
Moisture of the crop versus corn versus hay. As far as length of cut, that follows. When you're drier the hay, the longer, or shorter the cut, wetter the hay, longer the cut, which improves the pack, correct? Does that follow?
Does it follow the corn? Not when we look at that data where you saw that red outline on that shredlage. That was right at that 30 millimeter theoretical cut. It was coarse. Now they concentrate getting weight, packing properly. I certainly think that particle size has some to do with how well we can get the pile packed and sealed. But I think we influence it more by weight, by speed, by the next layer that goes on there to pack. And dry material, as everybody knows, it's hard to pack because it's spongy.
That's where length of cut.
That's where length of cut will help you. I don't have a table that says, 50% moisture, cut it 5/8 theoretical cut or 3/4 inch theoretical cut. But certainly we can help ourselves in this aspect by doing some. But you're asking about corn silage.
Corn and hay.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Haylage is a tough one. Corn silage. We did this 800 rule on haylage. Doesn't work very well. That wasn't a deciding factor in how well we got things packed. It was more dry matter, length of cut, and how we constructed the bunker pile.
What was the thing that, okay,
Not much? Yeah,
But then, again, you're taxable if it's up there.
yeah.
That's
Which their life of cut. Yeah.
better.
So, we know in general how some of this works. I don't have any charts specifically to give you to answer your question, but you're on the right track. Moisture on Haley, gotta cut it shorter,